we will open the hearing on House Bill 2688 and ask Jason to give us a bill brief.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Once again, Jason Thompson, Office of Revisor of Statutes. House Bill 2688 provides that a non-disclosure agreement by any party in an action related to childhood sexual abuse or human trafficking shall not be judicially enforceable in a dispute involving childhood sexual abuse or human trafficking allegations or claims. The bill is a new section of law that would provide that an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, by any party in an action related to childhood sexual abuse as defined in the Civil Code or human trafficking as defined in the Criminal Code shall not be judicially enforceable in a dispute involving allegations or claims relating to that conduct and shall be void. The section would apply to an NDA entered into before, on, or after the effective date of July 1st, so it is retroactive, except there is a mechanism for a person or a party to attempt to enforce an NDA entered into before the effective date if they go to a court of proper jurisdiction and obtain a declaratory judgment that declares the agreement or provision is enforceable. So there is retroactivity, but also a mechanism for certain agreements to be found by a court to be still valid if they're done before the effective date of the act. I think that's it for me. Be happy to answer questions if I can.
Okay, committee, what questions do you have for Jason? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. We'll go ahead and start with our proponents. We're going to go just out of order. We have Elizabeth Phillips with No More Victims. She was asking if she could go first. She's on WebEx. So we're going to go ahead. Tell me we have Elizabeth. Okay, great. Okay, so Elizabeth, welcome to committee. You are up first as far as the proponents go.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, Chair Humphreys and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to join you remotely today. My name is Elizabeth Phillips. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and I'm here to testify on behalf of my late brother, Trey Carlock, the namesake of House Bill 2688, which I very strongly support. I want to thank Vice Chair Williams and Representatives Bohai, Barrett, and Lewis for co-sponsoring this legislation to make the protection of victims' voices a priority in the state of Kansas. This bill ends the misuse of NDAs against child sexual abuse and trafficking victims in Kansas civil courts. My little brother, Trey, was abused at Kanakuk Ministries, a summer camp conglomerate based in Southwest Missouri. Kansas is one of their top markets. It's so encouraging that Kansas is joining a national movement to end the weaponization of NDAs against children that have already endured the unimaginable. I call it institutional abuse on top of sexual abuse. The legislatures of Texas, Missouri, Alabama, Tennessee, California have enacted laws so that silence is no longer for sale in civil settlement agreements pertaining to childhood sexual abuse cases. Kids should not be put under contracts, and childhood sexual abuse is shaming and silencing enough on its own. Survivors should never be forced to sign away their voices in exchange for settlement dollars they need for a lifetime of healing. Although this has become a standard practice in personal injury law, this committee can be the start of change in Kansas to say enough is enough. These are not slip and falls or construction and auto accidents. Childhood sexual abuse is trauma. It's an injury to the brain, body, and soul, and lawmakers must bring an end to the ongoing abuse of the system in these cases when victims seek civil justice. Let me outline how this happens, how it happened to my brother. Trey was groomed and abused from the age of 7 to 17 by a serial sex offender and Kanakuk director named Pete Newman. Newman has victims in Kansas, all over the US, and other parts of the world.
And Elizabeth, I know 2 minutes go so fast. I'm sorry, but if you could, you have time, if you could kind of move towards wrapping it up. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Because of Kanakuk's intimidating legal tactics and the NDA that was involved in the civil settlement process, I learned more about my brother's abuse and his death than I knew in his life. He died by suicide in 2019 because he could not heal after his voice was taken on top of his innocence. So we are asking that you join this national movement to end the misuse of NDAs, which were created to protect trade secrets, not trauma secrets. By doing that, you will honor Trey's life and legacy. You will bring darkness to light. You will give victims their voices back. And I thank you for your willingness to take this matter up. And I'm here also to take any questions.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and we appreciate what you're doing for your brother. Can you stay on for questions, or do you need to get off and so we can ask you questions now? What's your preference?
I can stay on.
You
Thank
can
you.
stay on, okay. All right, thank you. Okay, next we have Catherine Robb from Enough Abuse, and she's also on WebEx. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Catherine Robb, and I'm the National Director of the Children's Justice Campaign at Enough Abuse. I'm a national expert on child prevention legislation, and I am, of course, testifying in support of this bill, 2688. We're living in an epidemic of child sexual abuse. The best data tells us right now that 1 in 8 children will be sexually assaulted before their 18th birthday. All children are affected. This epidemic doesn't discriminate. An additional burden and danger is this problem about NDAs. They're just improper. Historically, they were used to protect confidential business data, trade secrets, and sensitive work data, and that, of course, makes sense. But they were not created to cover up sexual crimes and wrongs against children. NDAs, and this is probably the most important part of my testimony here, that NDAs for child sexual abuse are contrary to sound public policy, and they're dangerous for children. They silence victims and survivors just as Trey was silenced. They re-victimize victims, impeding real true healing, and it takes victims decades to come forward and find their voice. NDAs just take their voice away. Most importantly, they endanger our children now by 1, shielding sexual predators, covering up prosecutable crimes, mostly felonies against children, and concealing the negligent acts and practices of institutions and YSOs. Secrets serve sexual predators, not victims. Silence protects sexual predators, not our children. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. We now have the Reverend Ben Marquez, and welcome to our committee.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you. My wife said she was yielding her time, Madam Chair, if that makes it. Mine won't be long.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak in favor of House Bill 2688. My name is Ben Marquez. I'm here with my wife, Ashley. I'm an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church in America, also known as the PCA. I'm currently serving as the associate pastor of Heartland Community Church in Wichita, Kansas. I am in support of House Bill number 2688, as it is my hope that this legislation will protect victims of childhood sexual abuse and human trafficking allegations or claims against those who would seek to use an NDA in an effort to silence these victims. The reason I'm here today is because, more personally, a number of years ago, I served at a church in Wichita, Kansas called Eastminster Presbyterian Church from 2013 to 2022. On May 31st, I was called by one of the elders from the church saying that I was being put on administrative leave, that I was relieved of all my pastoral duties. I was essentially fired, and I was fired for trying to help the church maintain integrity and transparency over a series of events that had transpired over the previous year. Not sexual assault, but other issues that were going on at the time. Anyway, 8 days later, I found out why they had given me no reason for why they were firing me. It's because they handed me an NDA that, in God's grace, my wife and I had the prudence not to sign because it was being offered as a bribe. And that is my contribution to you today. I have given you all a copy of the NDA I was given so that you might see how they are used against victims of sexual assault. I will just read one line for you to hear. You further agree not to disclose the terms or the existence of this agreement. Perhaps you understand what Elizabeth Phillips' brother Trey had to endure when he couldn't share what he knew about what happened to him, even with his own counselor. And so I was given that in 2022. We didn't sign it. And 2 years later, in 2024, another gentleman who will speak to you today by the name of Tyson Stewart, he came forth and his story came out about the abuse he endured under Bodie Weiss, who was a gentleman who worked at the same church I worked at from the late 1980s to 2006. Tyson went public, and then another gentleman who was in a Bible study I led at the church those years I was there came and asked me if I had heard about the story. I said yes. And he said, I also was a victim of Bodie Weiss. And so I contacted the acting interim pastor at Eastminster Church, along with the associate pastor, a gentleman I had served alongside for almost 8 years. And I had lunch with them on August 20th, 2024. I told them to reach out to any of the known victims of Bodie Weiss to extend their deepest sympathies for the evil that they endured at the hands of this evil man. And then I asked them to publicly repent of their use of non-disclosures, a non-disclosure that I've provided for you today. After I left the next day, I emailed the session, which comprises the body of elders in Presbyterian governance. I think there was at least 16 of them, letting them know of my meeting with the two pastors and making the two same requests to reach out to the victims of sexual assault and for the church to publicly repent of their use of non-disclosures. I know there was allegations that Tyson will likely bring forth that there was one of the victims of Bodie Weiss at Eastminster was under NDA. Those are allegations. I haven't seen that, but it wasn't hard for me to believe, since they were willing to give one of their very own pastors, who did nothing to get fired except to try to keep them accountable for other issues that were going on in the church. And so I have attached that email and that letter that I wrote for you all to look at. And so just to conclude, children who are victims of sexual abuse and human trafficking have already been silenced. The reservoirs of shame that flood their souls keep them from crying out for help. The use of NDAs in those situations only exacerbate the constant state of shame and silence they have already had to endure. And this is evil, because it keeps them from doing what I, a minister of the gospel, tell them to do, which is to cry out to the Savior for help. Tragically, we all heard what happened to Elizabeth's brother, Trey. And so my hope that is, if passed, House Bill 2688 would end the evil practice of using NDAs to silence minors who have had to endure the evil of sexual abuse. Furthermore, my hope is that these victims, that the temptation for them to alleviate themselves of the forced silence by way of suicide would also not be given any more strength for these institutions to use against them. They're precious little ones who bear the image of God who created them, and so may God have mercy on them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We now will have Dr. Karen Irene Countryman Rossworm via WebEx.
Thank you, and thank you for
Sure.
allowing.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. It's been a long time.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairwoman Humphreys and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Karen Irene Countryman Roseworm, and for 29 years, I have had the honor to walk alongside thousands of victims, survivors, thrivers of various forms of abuse and exploitation, providing direct services, developing effective research-based practices, and drafting and advocating for federal and state anti-trafficking legislation that is rooted in real life. However, amidst these roles and efforts, even I have not been free from abuse, and I have yet to find true safety, justice, and voice for myself. Thus, today I stand before you outside of my titles and roles simply as a Kansan, as a wife and as a mother who is asking you to help me and others, like Trey, for whom this proposed legislation is named, stay alive, survive, and thrive. He didn't have the chance. My life has been filled with a myriad of abuse on the continuum of violence as a child at home and in the church. After my mother died by suicide when I was 13, and as an orphaned adolescent, I was then groomed, abused, and exploited in federally and state-funded group and foster homes, and then on the streets, and later in publicly funded higher ed, where I should have been safe. In the interest of time, I ask that you refer to my testimony for more detail. I just want to respect everyone that's here. But what I want to make clear is this. When I consider all of my life experiences across a lifespan of abuse, it is not a one singular direct act by one singular perpetrator that caused me the most harm and that causes me the most harm and trauma. Rather, it is first the complicit behavior of those who were aware but did not exercise courage. And second, the institutionalized abuse and consequently the institutional betrayal that is empowered by policy and law or the lack thereof. This includes the law, policies, and practices that promote and secure victim silencing through non-disclosure agreements, otherwise known as NDAs. Thus, worse still, by even sharing this testimony right now with you today, an effort I intend to just merely save my own life and continue assisting in the thriving of other victim survivors, I risk further harms to myself and my family today. With all of this, I am in support of House Bill 2688. This bill, as it is presented now, is just the beginning. This legislation in its current form serves only as a foundation for the law Kansans need to ensure victims' voices are no longer silenced by NDAs. If this legislation ultimately becomes the comprehensive law I believe it should be and that it will be, I and others could speak openly, free from the threat of legal retaliation, and more importantly, free from internal anguish. We, all Kansans deserve better. There is a groundswell of energy right now, and our efforts to expand and strengthen this legislation is possible. We as Kansans have the chance to be forerunners in this life-saving change, to come alongside Elizabeth and others across the nation to make this a reality. I look forward to working with this committee in the future to make this a reality right now in Kansas. I recognize and I humbly thank each and every one of you for your intentions and your efforts to make Kansas a safer place to live and thrive. Let's keep moving this forward. This is urgent. My life, our lives depend on getting this right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And people may have questions. If you can stay on with us, that would be great. Okay, Tyson Stewart, private citizen. Tyson, you're on WebEx. Are you there? Yep,
Yes.
okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm here today as a victim of childhood sexual assault. Some of you may know me from going public with my story of abuse that led to the discovery of at least 29 other victims by the same abuser. Chair Humphreys, Representative Lewis, it's good to speak with you again. I decided to go public because I knew one of the victims was unable to speak for themselves. They had reached a settlement agreement, and as a part of that agreement, he was silenced. When you're a survivor of sexual assault, your story, your experience is the only thing you really own in regard to that abuse. And to think of being a survivor and working through the trauma to come out healthy on the other end isn't hard enough. Imagine doing that with your proverbial tongue cut out. You don't get to own your story. Not to mention that organizations can litigate alternate realities within these contracts. This victim and his family told me that the organization under whose care the abuse took place, Eastminster Presbyterian Church, their claim that they still stand by, that the family requested the non-disclosure agreement, that assertion was, quote, bullshit. He did tell me that there is a clause in that agreement that should it be broken, they would have to pay Eastminster Presbyterian Church $36,000. Now, I haven't seen the document, but logic says, no way do you request a non-disclosure agreement for your son that was sexually abused as a minor and then put a financial penalty on him should he break it. The only thing that makes sense is that there is language in that document that legally created this false reality to protect Eastminster's image. When the point of contact for the organization and I first spoke prior to the investigation, he asked me, what do you want out of all of this? With a tone that was suggesting I was looking for money. And I responded with, how about getting the use of NDAs completely out of your church, I don't think Jesus ever preached about silencing victims, and he agreed with me. And yet here we are, almost a year after they released their findings, and they have yet to take such a measure. And the truth is, they never will. It is in their DNA, at least not until they are forced to by the passage of this bill. I urge you to help those survivors being silenced reclaim their experience. Protect future victims from living in a world where they have to decide between restitution and having a voice. You can help us all heal by passing this bill. And as a side note, Elizabeth, thank you so much for all of your work on this. I'm
Thank you,
grateful to be able to
Tyson.
join you in this cause, and I'll stay around for questions.
Okay, yep, thank you. Okay, we now will have Jill Butenbaugh, private citizen.
Hello, I'm Jill Butenbaugh, and I'm here to support this bill, and I concur with everything everyone before me has said. You have my testimony, so I would like to yield my minutes to Tracy Barclay.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Okay, Bruce, you want to go first or Tracy first? Okay, that's fine. So Jill and Bruce have yielded their time to Tracy, so Tracy, come on up. Welcome to our committee. Thank you for being here.
Chairperson, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to speak today. I confess that I'm really nervous about being here speaking, not because I'm afraid to speak, but because I'm afraid of failing my daughter and failing the other victims and sexual abuse victims and trafficking victims. So this is the first time that we are publicly speaking about the abuse that 41-year-old Matthew McFerrin in Trinity Academy in Wichita, Kansas, perpetrated on my 16-year-old daughter. It has taken 5 years for my daughter to battle the demons that tell her every day that she should be ashamed, that it's her fault, that she's less than. But now she's starting to find her voice after 5 years. That voice would have been silenced had she signed an NDA. Her abuse did not stop when the physical abuse stopped. It follows her every day into her mental health, her sense of safety, and her future. While Trinity Academy continued to operate, she was left to carry lifelong consequences that she did not choose and could not consent to as a child. We as her parents are so proud of how far she has come. Every day she has to get up and battle what people have talked about already. We call it trauma brain at our house. It has changed her in ways that no child should have to endure. She's demonstrated incredible strength, resilience, and courage, but I would tell you, she's different. She is a different kid after going through this. She ranks in the 97th percentile for severe PTSD. She's not a normal college student. She's trying to get on with her life, but she won't go to basketball games and football games with her friends because the noise and being there impacts her nervous system. All we wanted was for Trinity Academy to say, we're so sorry that this happened to you, but now we are going to use this trauma for God's glory to protect other children. And this is why Trey's Law matters. This isn't just a Kanakuk issue. It's not an Eastminster Presbyterian issue. It's not just a Trinity Academy issue. This is a systemic abuse issue. So we want to talk about accountability. Sin's not meant to be covered. It's not meant to be hidden. It's meant to be brought into the light. Light is light, evil is evil. When abuse is hidden, it is not healed. It is protected. So after our child was abused, Trinity Academy sought a non-disclosure agreement. They wanted the harm that was perpetrated on her to be kept dark. She was offered millions of dollars. My daughter was. At 21 years old, she refused that money. She said, I'm going to choose truth over money. I'm going to choose light over silence. She wanted accountability. So at Trinity Academy had a town hall meeting when the abuse first came out. And on YouTube publicly for the whole state of Wichita or Kansas to see, he said, Pete Oakes, who's one of the founding fathers of Trinity Academy, said, Matthew McFerrin, he's not the enemy, he's a brother that stumbled. This statement was made about a man that groomed and preyed on my daughter for 10 months. There was no mention of a victim, and I don't mean by name, but I mean come alongside somebody that says, we have a predator in our midst. We need to come alongside and acknowledge this child's pain, get support for her. What they did offer her was an NDA. So like I said, true healing for a survivor cannot happen in the dark. Silence does not bring restoration, secrecy doesn't bring justice, and redefining abuse as a stumbling block while ignoring a victim is confusing, manipulative, and devastating, especially to a child that has been taught to trust pastors, teachers, and Christian leaders as moral authority. Pastors shouldn't want this, Christian teachers shouldn't, leaders of any institution should not want to excuse this behavior under an NDA. Trey's law draws a clear and necessary line. It affirms that abuse is abuse, that victims have the right to speak, that no institution, religious or otherwise, should be allowed to silence survivors, excuse criminal behavior, or redefine harm to protect itself. This 16-year-old survivor from Trinity deserves protection. She deserves adults that name evil for what it is. She deserves a law that would stand firmly on her side. Future children deserve the same protection. I urge you to pass Trey's law and send a clear message that Kansas will not tolerate the concealment of abuse, the silencing of victims, or the misuse of authority in any institution. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. We appreciate that. So committee, that's our in-person proponents. We're going to go ahead and have questions for them. And I might start. So Tracy, could I ask you a question? So just so that I understand, I know your daughter was maybe 21 when she was offered the NDA, but what if she was 16? I mean, how does that work if it's a minor? Like what was your story, or how does that happen if they're less than 18?
Thank you for asking. Our story, she was 15 when the grooming started, 16 when the abuse happened. She lived in our basement for 2 years because she was so ashamed. She didn't want people to know, cut everybody off, cut all of our friends off. Anybody that we spoke to could not address our daughter because she was so ashamed. So for us, we were not offered the NDA until the civil suit came about because she wanted to be able to keep her voice, and that was not going to be allowed to happen otherwise.
Okay, so she was already an adult.
So she was an adult, but
Okay.
we took the time to have her get healing, and the reason it has taken so long was so that she could get enough counseling and be in a place where she could go through the process of getting accountability for herself.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Committee, what questions do you have? Representative Sappington.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this is for you as well, Tracy. So what happened with your daughter's abuser? Were there criminal charges ever filed, or did it run out the statute of
Yep,
okay.
there were criminal charges filed, and he got the maximum sentence, which was not long enough. It was 34 months.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Osman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I suppose I have a question, but it's not directed to anybody, but I'm happy to have you address it if you'd like. So first of all, to all the proponents, thank you very much for your testimony, and thank you very much for your powerful stories. I am in support of this bill, but I do have a question. The reason that you have an NDA is obviously in this particular situation is to hide the truth. But the NDA itself comes about because of a settlement. And the settlement happens for a variety of reasons, whether it's because you don't wish to, there's the uncertainty of the trial, or the cost of the trial, or the length of the trial. And all of that gets settled in a settlement. If the NDA is taken up, how does that affect one's ability to, how does that affect the victims who may not wish to go through a trial, but now the organization that is perpetrating these crimes has less incentive to work out a compromise or work out something to help the victims?
That's a good question. I feel like for us, there is a way that you can protect victims and not have an NDA. And for us, it would be coming alongside them. It costs money to be a sexual assault victim. I hate to say it, but it does. There are years of therapy, twice a week. I mean, it's been 5 years for us, and it's probably going to be forever to go. And it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to have a civil suit. So I feel like this isn't just about bringing alongside people. They need to make the right decision to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. I feel like it deters people from becoming sexual predators in institutions because they know they're not going to be protected.
Does anyone else would like to answer that question too, maybe from a different standpoint? I don't know, just offering that. Okay, great.
If I could,
Please go ahead.
and I know this is like a quick, not thorough answer of your question, but I really appreciate your question. And I just wanted to highlight that when I mentioned that there's systems in place that encourages the NDAs and specifically like pays for silencing, this comes about for a variety of reasons. In my situation, again, we got to look at things like the reality that if abuse happens in a publicly funded organization or entity, the state has limitless caps to pay for the protections of the perpetrator. That then fueled with the reality that in civil suits, there's these caps. If you're a victim, I mean, it barely pays the attorney fees. So the attorney that should be representing you if you're a victim is also encouraging you to sign that NDA. So I hope that is at least starting to answer some of your question, that there's a lot of dynamics, but I do understand where you were going with your question as well. So thank you.
It does. Thank you so much.
Sorry, Ms. Phillips, did you have your hand raised too?
If I may respond to the question, I think what you're alluding to is, does this have a chilling effect on settlements occurring or maybe depressing settlement values even? It's my 5th time this week testifying on this in different states across the country. And that's one of our frequently asked questions. And the answer, based on empirical and anecdotal data, is no. This does not decrease the settlement value, and it does not chill the effect or push things to trial that would otherwise settle. So we have a section on our website that goes into more detail on those studies. Since this has been passed in a broader Crime Victims Act in California in 2016, in Tennessee in 2019, and as I mentioned, several other states since then, we can actually look at that and answer your question emphatically, that does not occur.
Thank you very much. Actually, my alternate question exactly was what happens in other states. So thank you for addressing that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have a question from Representative Carmichael and then Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is excellent legislation, long overdue. And I can tell you from a lot of personal experience representing people in these contexts, if you take NDAs off the table as a matter of law, then it's not a part of the negotiation. And as a result, people still get their full value of the settlement because the employers typically know that their NDA isn't worth the paper it's written on. Now, my question, Ms. Robb, are you still available? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I think yep, I'm available. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, there she is. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Robb. I was looking at this legislation. I don't know if you have it in front of you, but at line 9, it limits, as far as I can tell, the abrogation of non-disclosure agreements to individuals who are a party in an action. I'm not sure whether this means in the same action, but more broadly, in my experience, oftentimes these folks go from employer to employer. They do things at one employer, a settlement may be reached, an NDA that shuts up the mouths of the victims, then they go somewhere else. And when the lawsuit is filed, it's against the employer, not the assailant oftentimes. And then when you go to try to get discovery to show a pattern or a practice and eventually establish the current employer should have known, you're met with an NDA so that the people who want to try to help others are not handcuffed, but their mouth is taped shut. Does this reach far enough? Is there something we can do to help vitiate other NDAs, not necessarily involving the present party?
There certainly is. We could certainly add stronger language to this particular bill, and I did just pull it up, by the way. And I think the argument is a very sound public policy argument that when you're silencing a victim, you are essentially taking away credible witnesses to speak. So I believe, Elizabeth, I'm not sure if you want to touch on that in the Texas piece of legislation as well, because I do believe that was addressed there.
Yes, the bill that's gone the furthest to include other parties, such as the ones you're referring to, is the Texas version that was passed and went into effect last September. It does include employees who may be witnesses to the underlying cause or claim. So I would encourage the committee to look at the Texas legislation, and if I were there in person, I would provide the materials. But it's all on treyslaw.org as well for your convenience, if that's helpful.
Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Elizabeth actually just answered my question with her last statement, which was the website that everyone can go to for more information. So I appreciate everyone's powerful testimony today.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any other members have questions? Anybody? Okay, seeing none, I do want to draw your attention to many written-only proponents, Gina Meyer Hummel, who most of you know, I think, Tammy Sanders, Tiffany Reese, Lisa Ritchie, Laura McGrew, Julie Shaw, James Jost, Lynn Hankins, Janie Buchanan, Jill Greer, Kim Borchers, Maddie Ritchie, Jeff and Denise Bennett, Diana Matthews, and Roger Matthews, and Shelley Packard, as well as our three proponents who were going to be speaking but yielded their time, Ashley Marquez, Jill Butenbaugh, and Bruce Barclay. Okay, so please look at that over. I do anticipate working this bill on Monday. So I'd like to go ahead and get that passed out of the committee and onto the House floor. So with that, I'll close the hearing on House Bill 2688. And thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you and telling us your stories, and we will take action on Monday.